Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to OneTech's November 5th, 2020 meeting. So let's get started. So this is the OneTech board. It's me and uh, Tanner and Andy, who's also on this call. Tim, who is not on this call, and Todd, who has been helping us out lately. So this is our these are the set of people who bring to you OneTech. If you want to uh, get in touch with us, there's the meetup page, Twitter account. That's probably the best route, or you can join us on Facebook or LinkedIn. Upcoming meetings on December 10th, 2020, we have Jeremy Lickness from Microsoft, who's also he's a PM in the entity framework team, I think. He's planning on giving a great talk. So join us on December 10th, 2020. OneTech is, we took a summer hiatus. We're back. If you want to help us, you can always contribute at that link. And yeah, if anyone has any announcements, feel free to bring it up now. So tonight's agenda, obviously we'll do the welcome and announcements. This talk is recorded. It will be available on YouTube. We're switching to YouTube instead of Twitch. And tonight's speaker, of course, is Aaron. Aaron is a cloud solutions architect now with IBM. Before that, he was for a brief period with Microsoft, and that is where we kind of got to talking, and I was amazed by his proficiency in obtaining Microsoft certification. So I figured, other people might be interested in hearing about it. So here he is. Aaron is a cloud solutions architect now with IBM. He helps fintech and healthcare tech startups. He's also the president of the Fort Smith Tech Users Group. That's Fort Smith, Arkansas, right?
Yes.
He started as a developer and later served as a manager of developer, business analyst, test analyst, vendor manager. So he's done he's been around the industry quite a bit. He's worked in all sorts of verticals in the industry: banking, electric utilities, healthcare, transportation. He's an analytical and solution-oriented professional with expertise in guiding teams to improve efficiency in core issues. In his free time, Aaron enjoys working out. Maybe he'll give us some workout tips along with certification tips. He loves music and food festivals, video games, and spending time with his family. So with that, I will stop sharing and hand it over to Aaron.
Okay. Okay, make sure everybody can see my screen.
Yep.
All right, great. So thanks for having me. So can't do too many music industries right now, music festivals, because they're kind of not happening. So one of the things I tried doing recently was kind of getting back into working out and healthy, kind of better eating since I was getting around instead of, in shape the right way. So that made me kind of think a little bit about my presentation title. And so we've titled the certification Superset study strategy. So Superset from working out is that you kind of pair more than one thing together to kind of maximize your efficiency. So what I hope to kind of cover today is a series of insights that training techniques that I've used going back to the military after high school, that I learned about in high school, applied to military specialization training, then in college, and then throughout my career at different key points of time that have kind of helped build confidence, but also allows me to study things quickly and grasp the concepts for different types, not just testing, but also kind of awareness. So, and I'm also a serious fan of Star Wars, not like where I know all the kind of history and all the little quotes, but just kind of grew up watching it. So throughout the slide, you'll see series of quotes that I'll explain that kind of fall into, key moments And so as we kind of get started, let's see on my side. See the next slide. Okay, so first from Yoda. All these quotes tonight are from Yoda. In a dark place, we find ourselves, and a little more knowledge lights our way. So, of course, it's 2020. It's completely pitch black, like it is an outside night tonight, and it's just awful. It's just brutal. It's wearing on us emotionally, energy, then the election, and that can be thrown into it, and COVID, and just everything's a mess. So, what I've tried to do is jump into improving myself in as many areas as I can, just one area at a time. And so, knowledge when I first started Microsoft was all about Azure and taking advantage of the certification and training assets that are available to me as a Microsoft employee to kind of really jump in and get up 120% into myself and into the job role, into my teammates, and to kind of grow myself. And it allows me to kind of not be so distracted because I'm very fortunate to have found a job with Microsoft and now IBM. And here, my first couple of weeks at IBM, I'm applying the same thing. So this is kind of what this quote means to me, and hopefully you can kind of take something from it and keep on a happy path forward. So the first what I want to show you is kind of proof is in the pudding. Make sure I'm not a mystic, snake oil salesman and saying, hey, you've got to buy this training course that I'm just going to highlight. So these are the exams I took. These were not my first Microsoft certification exams or certification. I had like ITIL certification exam before, and these last 7, before that I passed, I think it was like 11 or 12 exams from 2000, which are like Visual Basic, Office programming, the very first MCSD, MCSD.NET, SQL Server exams, every so often. You can see back in 2018, I challenged myself and I took 2 in one day. And so this time joining Microsoft, one of the main study tools that's available is the Measure Up practice exams. And so they're free to the employees to utilize, and the exams are free. So I really wanted to take advantage of that. And so that's where I created the self-challenge. Let me see, I needed to do some exams for my job role and to meet the job requirements as far as one, helping the customers, but also the job requirements of to had certain deadlines. So I said, okay, I knew the exams I need to take. Let me just see how fast I can do and just press. And so these are the exams I took. I started off with implementing an Azure data solution, and then Azure Data Fundamentals, Azure the 201 other designing Azure data solutions, and then the 2 architect exams, the older ones that just were now retired, then the fundamentals, and then AI 100. So it's a mixture of type of exams. The 900s are kind of your intro, and then the other exams kind of build up upon the knowledge, and some are AI, and we can kind of go a little more in depth. So it's kind of the proof in the pudding to make sure, it's not, smoke and mirrors. So what I hope to kind of share today is that kind of give you an overview of Microsoft certification, what the process is like, and then what exam to maybe start with, identify kind of how you identify what's on an exam. What's the whole exam process when you're going to go take an exam and register? And then what are some of the practice exams that are out there? You might know some of them. Then we're going to jump into really the kind of heart of what you can take to apply to anything. And I'm going to apply this to my new exams that I need to take for IBM and I take for learning other subjects. But it's study and note-taking tips, and then also kind of discovering your preferred learning methods. There are many different learning methods out there that you need to be aware of, and you need to build upon your strengths and then build up on your weaknesses as well. So that way you can be kind of the best person around. So next slide. Okay. So the kind of general area of certifications from Microsoft are programming languages, office support, AI, data engineering / scientist, DBA, DevOps, and the whole category in Azure. There's numerous in those areas. The programming languages don't get the spotlight they used to. I know some of the C# MVC exams are supposed to retire in January. I don't know if there'll be a map forward for those, but in the past, I've also helped write test questions for Measure Up for, of course, Python exam. There's also C# and Python exams out there as well. So hopefully be more information on those in January. So one of the main things I like to do is, always the cheapest route as fast, to make it economical and more available to everybody else. So I kind of will showcase and start with those things. So there's a bit.ly link I have for MS Cert Guide. So it'll bring you straight to the training and certification guide. You want to kind of click on that, and the way to kind of go a deeper, in-depth information on each of the exams. I won't jump into that because it gets really too specific for the talk we have here today, but it's a good link to utilize. You can always cycle back to me or Santosh about exams and kind of what's a little more in-depth from the 1,000-foot level we'll cover today. So first, it's like, well, what exam do you even start? Do you even look at? Do you want to, venture down? Well, like anything, your path you must decide, it says. So depends upon where you're coming from, might make a whole different sense. So what my general approach is that when you're taking an exam, especially if it's an exam for the very first time, say it's your first Microsoft exam or it's your first AWS exam, but you've taken Microsoft exams, you still want to go after a goal that's achievable and yet you want to build upon. So the best exams for first timers to look at are anything with a 900 at the end. They are not as complex, they're not as in-depth. There's an AI 900, there's a DP 900, and there's the Azure Fundamentals 900. Any one of those are really good to start with. And they're free training for that covers a huge amount on any of the exams through the Microsoft Learn tools, as well as outside stuff. And at the end, I'll share links for other lower cost options for training that are beneficial. So if you are a developer, then that's not going to take away those 3 exams. So say you haven't touched Azure, say you haven't even, read anything on it, but maybe you've seen 1 or 2 tweets or Santosh, talk about it. Then I would start with the C# exams. They're still out there. There's also a Python exam, and that should be easily attainable versus the others. And don't worry about it going away. The whole learning process is really super beneficial. When we get into what's on the exam, we'll kind of see why. But so if you've been doing some development in Azure and some of the hands-on stuff, maybe you've worked with Azure Tables, maybe you've built a web app and published something out there, then the developer exam, I think it's the 204 exam now, is a really good place to start, or even the fundamental 900 exam. Either one couldn't go wrong there. Now, the next paths up are there are exams that you would want to pair together. Some of the training materials, so the exams, the administrator exams, have a heavy overlap with the architect exams. So my recommendation is to study for some of those materials the same way. And definitely the 2 data exams, the DP 200 and 201, they overlap something like 80%. There's very little in the study material that is different. Because a lot of times when you go to study, read a blog post, you cover something on Pluralsight or through any other various channels and medium information, you might be covering something on Azure Synapse. And the content you might cover might be on either one of the exams. So just study for both of those exams at the same time, and you're going to do a lot better. So I can always help people offline after, but your path is really individual. I know Santosh will be willing to help as well too. But it's really a case-by-case basis. Start for a low, easy goal, no matter what. It doesn't have to be Microsoft exams. It could be, like I said, any other exam. Start for a very first success, build that confidence, and then go immediately stay and pounce and go get the next one. Don't stop. Beat me. Be more than 7. Do 10. All right. So what's on an exam? So you decide an exam. Okay. I threw a dart, or I decided, Santosh or Aaron said, start with this one. Okay. So you got an exam. So identify one. Where do you go? What do you do? So take a look here at the Microsoft Certified Azure Developer Associate exam. So in this high level, you find this by going to the actual website or doing a search for this or in the exams, or just doing AZ-204 in a search, and you'll land the Microsoft page. Look at this here. Doesn't tell you a whole lot what to study. It's like, wow, well, that doesn't help me. What do I, how do I build my training plan around this little bit of information? The key is there's a section down below for every exam that you want to look at. And see if you can go to the next slide. And down below, there's this key link here, download certification skills outline. That's going to be a PDF document, and 2 important things here. It's going to outline the major areas, which are broken up percentages, the sub areas, what I also call the third tier. We'll see in a second. This will tell you what in detail is on the exam and what percentage of the exam, and also let you know if you see a little warning or announcement, this exam is changing. You can look in there and you'll see a red line document sometimes, or they'll say this exam is being completely overhauled. Here's the old section and here's the new format. It's your friend for both of those cases. So you start studying and all of a sudden you realize I've scheduled the exam, in 2 or 3 months and it's going to change. Don't worry about it. Look to here. This will tell you how it's changing. A lot of times the changes are not that drastic throughout the middle year, but when they change the numbers, they tend to have a greater degree of change. So if we look at here, we see skills measured, develop Azure compute solutions, develop Azure storage, implement Azure security, monitor, connect. And so that's like, well, some level, but I don't really know what that means. And then you can see up top, kind of take one exam, kind of what's the kind of larger badge, or title you can kind of earn. Will kind of help show you that. So if we jump into this example of what's on the exam, I have a link at the very end. I'll share that. I forgot who has, it might be Build 59's website has a lot of exams broken down to where you can go and kind of go through these third tier, the bullet points, and check and see, do I know that or not? And you can give yourself a quick assessment on how ready or how maybe far off to some measurement you are from the exam. They give you an idea how much preparation time you need to do. Again, this will kind of depend upon your study time and how risky you are. So like when I took the exam, it was free. So most of the exams take 70% to pass. And so it was free to me. If I failed it, there's not a lot of risk there.
Quick thing I wanted to mention. So right now, this is kind of an honor system, but Microsoft is giving each exam for $15. Yep.
Yeah, there's a whole big initiative push, and I don't know if the other providers are doing this or they had stopped, but right now through, I forget what the end date is, but I think I have a link at the very end to the article that covers, you can get a lot of the Azure exams. There's about 30 exams. You can go and register, and for $15, take an exam as long as you take it before the end of January. And it's based upon
the one caveat to that is it's generally aimed at people who want to increase their skills to become more employable, especially in this job environment. So I'm not sure, it's necessarily targeted at people who already have jobs. It's honor system.
The intent is if you were impacted by COVID. Now, that can mean a lot of things, but make sure it's out there. If it's not for you, make sure you share the word because we just want to help everybody. Thanks, Santosh. Yeah, I was going to definitely mention that. So if you look at here, this example, we've got develop Azure compute solutions. That's 25 to 30%. So that's a fair amount. And every exam has got around 5 to 8 sections that it breaks up around the percentages on. And it's variable because it's a random bank. You never know how many questions you're going to get. You might get 30% of the questions in this one, and the next time you retake it, you might get a lot less. So then we have implement IaaS solutions. We didn't see that before in the overall write-up, and so then it breaks it down to like 6 bullet points. So it gets pretty deep on what does that mean. And so from here, even if you just print this off and set and highlighted and color coded 3 colors, green, red, yellow. Green, I've done that. Yellow, I've only read about it but never done it. Red, I've never heard about this in my world. Then you can kind of step back and say, how much do I need to know? How far off am I? Just to kind of get a true self, indicator. Things you can do for studies, Microsoft Learn. Try these. That covers a lot of the same material. Different exams, I think, have a different level of quality of matching and preparation. But it's a great way to kind of learn about it. You don't have to pay for a class. Take these learning models, are kind of nice little snippets. You always come back and do more. I've heard that the current DevOps one from a couple of friends is the learning models are kind of key and probably all you really need. But I'll recommend some other things. So this is you can do the paid if you want to, or if your company's paying for it. But I think nowadays more people are doing this. Now, other ways to prepare are practice exams. There are different companies that practice exams have mentioned Measure Up. They range around $90 for 30 days. I think it's like $100 or like $10 more for 60 days. When I pay for myself, I buy the download version because you get it forever, and if it changes, then you get the updates, and it's always good. So if you take a data exam, you kind of get the badge, but you don't touch it for 6 months, you can come back and crash course study it. There are, I think it's Wiz Labs has got a subscription for $99 for a year. You get access to all their training, and they also have test questions. Their degree of quality is not as good, and I'll kind of explain later on. But those are some great, and I've got links at the very end. So this is a great way to kind of prepare. Especially if you don't have an account, you don't need an Azure account or kind of local box to kind of do this hands-on if you don't have it. So you don't have the money, or you only got a really low-powered PC on your, sometimes on your phone or tablet. There's a way to kind of make it work with, little expenditure to yourself. So next is, what is it like taking an exam? Now, these were the first exams I took self-proctored at home. Every time else, I've always drive to a test center, and I was always kind of scared of taking them at home. I was worried about somebody making noise, just not knowing what it's like. So didn't have a lot of risk, like I said, doing for Microsoft because they were paid for. So during this time frame, I had scheduled 9 exams. 2 of the exams, the first one I registered for was the DP 900. First day it came out. Proctor never showed up. That was kind of a bad, it's kind of a just sour experience, but life goes on. Then during one of my other exams, the DP 201, I was taking that one on a Friday morning, and I got about halfway through, and all of a sudden Proctor couldn't see me on camera. So they tried a couple things, they didn't work, so they had to cancel it. And in that case, they would have kind of given me a refund, and I had to retake it. So it's kind of a bummer. But the rest of them were smoothless. They were not smooth. They were smooth. There was no issues, no bumps whatsoever in the process. Now I had a decent computer, so one of the things you want to make check is you'll go to OneView, you'll run a little system check to make sure your device meets the minimum requirements. One thing to do is, before you take the exam, is you're going to turn off your notifications, turn on T notifications. Like I would log out of Teams, I would log off Skype, and under your little system tray, make sure those things are all turned off. And what I always would do is I would do a fresh reboot, make sure several hours beforehand I use the Windows updates, because you don't need to go in there and all of a sudden an update forces and you miss your window. Things you want to think about when you're taking it. You need to be in a space or a time frame where you're not going to be disturbed by loud noises. Now, like I sit in a room, and off to the side is my living room. You can kind of hear the TV, but you really can't. They're mainly more concerned about you having a party in your next room, or your kids or your dog comes running into the room, then they'll just cut the exam off. So you need to find, now the benefit with the online process is there's slot times for almost 24 hours a day. Whereas testing center, you're kind of limited to those. And so you have to find out what time frame during the day works best for you. I tried early in the morning around 6 before work or before the kids would wake up, and I did like 11 p.m. at night. And to me, that was better because everybody was asleep. I was wake up or kind of walk in or need anything. I've got my kids are 8 and 10, so they're not infants, so different set of challenges. So I made sure for that. Then your room. Off to the side here, I've got bookshelves. Right now, my room's a mess. This is an art room that you can see or not, that my wife uses. They don't care about all that. What they care about is I'm on a wall. I had a printer here for a while. They would maybe just unplug the printer and put it on the floor. If you have extra monitors, you would just unplug them. They might ask to check them. I only had one previously, so I just take it and put it on the floor, get rid of it. And they want to make sure you don't have any kind of posters or notes hanging up, or make sure your desk is kind of cleared. So those kind of the key things you want to do, is to make sure that if you run into issues, there are some provisions where they'll allow you to retake the exam. And for the system test, you'll just run the here and say, test my system. They'll just run a kind of simple process. And so you'll do that. You definitely want to do that when you do that today. If you're thinking about, hey, I might take an exam, run the system test today. That way you know if your laptop is severely out of, non-compliant or out of issue, out of maybe not able to handle it. Now, granted, I was on the Surface Laptop 3 with like 32 gigs of RAM, so I was never going to run into an issue like that. But I was always scared beforehand doing my own computer. So this is my desk that I have before I added stole a second monitor for my old computer. So I had that's kind of my working day desk. I had a second monitor, a printer, my binder out with taking notes, and so like I said, just move the printer off, unplug it, second monitor, unplug it, coffee mugs, put away, any extra battery chargers, my iPad under the desk, and move that away, my binder, close up, move away, just have my mouse and my laptop. And that's it, clean workspace. And when you check in, you start the process online, then you'll kick over to the phone, and the phone will let you take pictures. You're going to take a picture of your driver's license or identification, front and back, upload that. Then they ask you to take a picture for me from the wall looking back behind me, and then from the wall, from standing behind me to the wall so they can see that space, and then from the right looking left, and from the left looking right. I'm at a window right here on this side where you see the pencil holder. That's not an issue. Just want to make sure, like I said, there's no posters and no big, post-it note of cheat sheets or kind of outlines you may utilize. And it's a non-issue there. And what you can do is you can check in up to a half hour early for your sessions. So if I book 11, I can start the check-in process at 10:30. Do that. Make sure once you get the process down, it takes maybe 10 minutes to check in. But just in case there's a weird hiccup, you're there, you're early, and they can start the exam up to 15 minutes early. So book it like whatever time works for you, but start the process a half hour, and you can usually start at 15 minutes early. And the exam times, or listen to every exam, how much time they give you. They give you around 90 plus minutes, sometimes 2 hours, depending on what exam. I've always taken every exam in under an hour. And I just gotta go through the questions and don't triple second guess myself in the process. But everybody take them at your own pace. Make sure you answer them all, and we'll kind of get into test taking. So if there's any questions, on the process of what it's like to take an exam, we can answer those questions now or enter them in chat, and we can kind of, help you out through that. Okay. So practice exam.
The only thing I'll say is I've heard of people getting failed because their wife or kid walked into the room or something like that. So so just be really careful with family members, and, especially with COVID. I know everyone's working from home, so it's really hard to do that. But for the period of the exam, you have to make sure there's absolutely no one in the room.
Yeah, that's where for me I found that 11 p.m., 10:30 at night was less risk of that happening for me personally, and it worked well. It's where I could kind of study a little bit throughout the day and then kind of go into it. Me, when I first wake up, I can jump and wake up and do work, but I just feel like I had like 7 hours and some information might have left my brain. So play at the times, look what's out there, take heed of those two notes. And that's why I had to actually. Through the key thing is through the system tray, log off of Skype, log off of Teams, so you don't get no random notification or random updates that they try and run. The next is practice exams. So there's different places you can go to practice exams. Wiz Labs is one. There are also some that other individuals, Scott Duffy sells on Udemy for some of the exams, not all the exams that are available. There are different quality, different things. This is, if you can afford to take less exams, but want to kind of do a better job at passing it, this is my personal recommended. Back in the day, used to be a similar kind of company called Transcender that did this stuff that I used in 2000s and early on. So there's 3 different prices, 30 days, 60 download. I'd recommend do the download. You can install it like 5 different times, and you can do it offline. But the main thing is treat it like it's like a book. It's like a textbook that you can go back and study from. You don't, when you pay when you spend $99, when you $20 more, I think it is, for keeping it permanently, that's well worth the money, having a resource permanently available. They have, when you go to the website, if you're not certain, you can go there and try a demo in their software. I'm going to walk through their software specifically because it's the most realistic, even if you do the demo, to see what an exam kind of feels like if you haven't taken a Microsoft exam ever. You can go certification or practice. Certification is just like the real exam. It's time. You don't get the answers at the end. This test on the sample mode. There's like 5 questions. In the real world, when you download it, the certification practice mode, if you buy the product, they'll give you the right amount of questions for the exam, which is anywhere from around 50 questions roughly. Practice, you got a couple more configuration options. And I always recommend starting here. Inside the configuration, you can choose to do custom duration minutes or randomize the questions. And what I do is I keep it randomized for a little challenge. But the main area that I always choose is to auto display the answers to any response. So I'm on a question. I'm going to try and answer the best of my ability. Then I immediately get feedback of if it's right or wrong, plus other stuff will show. Do this for the demo for the 5 questions. When you go to study, you want to study in a time manageable, time box event. Most of these exams, when you buy them, we saw the outline of sections from the 204 rather exam. It's like 5, 6 sections. You can go to the section there that says show objectives. You can choose from there a couple, one, or multiple objectives, or just one. I always start with the one. I just choose the first one. I figure out how many questions are in that they have available by going to the first box we're on and choose like 100 questions. And then go to the objective, find out, I'll select that objective, and then I'll hit auto display the answers to any response and start. And it's going to tell me, oh, we don't have 100 questions for the objective. We may only have 24. I write that down. I do that for every objective on the exam. So I've written down, I know every subsection, how many questions they have. So when I come back and do it again for a second, third, fourth round, how many times you need, I've already got that written down. I still have it written down in my binder. So I know how many in that sub area to do. So I would just take that first section on the 204 and I would go through those questions, because if you got 24 questions, if you're taking it the first time and you're reading it, it's going to take you a while to go through 24 questions, especially the very first time. You want to read and you want to try and absorb as much as possible. And then at the end, your brain's kind of tired. Pace yourself. It's like a marathon. Pace yourself and then cover the next section. It's a good way to kind of break it up. And so they'll tell you at the beginning how much you need to pass, how many questions are in there, if you have a minute time frame. The real exam kind of does the same thing too. The only thing different is the real exams, I think it's typically I think all exams are like 70% now, which means you can miss like sometimes 10, 12 questions or portions of questions. And they'll tell you the duration. The only thing that happens in the real world exam is they'll do a kind of a questionnaire beforehand of how much did you prepare for this exam? Why are you taking the exam? And you can answer that to your best ability, or sometimes you might have moved, just give me the exam, click, click, click. Then it jumps to here and lets you a warning, okay, you're about to start the exam, how's it work? And then you'll see a kind of a start button and you hit start. And it's like a roller coaster, or at least for me it is, to where you start the exam and your heart's racing, you're going up the code, you come to the peak and you're trying to answer the questions best as possible. And then when you're finished, you hit finish. And it's like the very end of the roller coaster where it's like just a wave of rush. Did I pass or did I fail? And then if you pass, it's like euphoria. It's almost like a runner's, endorphin high of like, oh, I want to do it again. So it can be addictive like that. So we're going to go over some of these 5 sample questions. Is what other type of questions? What can you expect to see? And then we'll break down 1 or 2 questions on how I see information, and when I wrote test questions for Measure Up, how I went by writing them. So in this example, in this question, it's kind of the choice. It's kind of the two drop-down boxes. So you multi-select. What happens in the real exam is you'll see something like this, and each one is worth some amount of points. It might say each correct answer is worth 1 point, or it won't tell you that. If it's a multiple choice, like we'll see later on, it'll say just answer the question, and you either get some percentage of points. So if you do the math in your head, if you got 50 questions, but some have 1 point each, the ones that are say 1 point each are worth a lot less than a question that just has a radio button that says it's. So you know in your head, if you don't know one of those, that's not a big deal. That's 1 point. So understand the breakout when you take an exam, and this is kind of one area that none of the practice exams do. They don't kind of showcase this wording in the exam and the practice exams. So, but pay attention to that. So this question is they want you to complete the code. And so you hit the drop downs. Other variations might be to drag a box. You got a question, an answer bank of maybe 5 answers. And so you got to drag one to the right area. It's the same concept of dragging, but picking something from a subset. Next is, so here's the explanation. So this is the benefit of the Measure Up exam, is that when you are taking a Measure Up practice exam, when I was an author as well, we had to write out what is the correct answer and why is it correct, and the wrong answers are the wrong answers and why, and then reference a section from Microsoft documentation or some other reputable documentation as to why. So you're learning not just about why the right answer is right and the context of the question, but also why the wrong answers are right and how it's typically related to a tangent piece of information or a tangent Azure product or service. So this, you can learn so much quicker than just reading a page directly about, how to do cloud storage. It's beneficial, but you'll be able to skim and get a lot of stuff faster. So next with the select, so now you have to pay attention here. This one says pick 2 answers. Sometimes it's just 1 or 2, and sometimes they'll say pick 2, each one is worth 1 point. Sometimes it won't say that, so it's kind of a different scale. And so in this example, it gives you, you got 4 choices. So typically you can easily eliminate 1 or 2, and you're down to 2. And worst case, if you're not sure, you get 50-50 if it's pick 1. So here, and then when you hit the show the response, it's going to show you the 2 highlighted green answers, and it's going to walk you through why the right ones are the right answers and why the wrong ones are the wrong ones. So immediately you're learning about Azure AD P1 license, you're learning about conditional access policies, then you're also learning about application proxy and Azure AD and Azure AD business to business. I mean, this amount of information in about 5 minutes of reading is really worthwhile. So here's a kind of variation that is pretty typical, and that you've got a question. There's a task, and so you need to pick the items, and there's always more choices, and you need to either put them in the right order or the order might not matter. So pay attention to that. So most of the time, the order matters. Then there are then what's not covered here in this exam that's also worthwhile covering is a case study. There's 2 types of case studies. There's a case study of where they give you a 1 or 2 line problem, then they give you a 1-line solution, and then they ask you, will this solution meet the needs, yes or no? Then they change 1 slight variation in the solution and ask you the same question again, and then a 3rd time. And so it could be where 1 of the 3 is right, or it could be where 2 of the 3 are right, then depending upon the question. So that's the first type of case study. This is a kind of a newer one that came out in the past 2 years or so. And what happens there is you'll do that for like 3 questions, then you'll do another solution for 3 questions, another for 3 questions, typically when those come up. And then when you leave those, you can't, for any one of those questions, you can't go back. Then you'll jump to the section of questions like this, where you can jump back from these questions, mark them off, and go back to them and review them. And the last type is a traditional case study where they've got several areas of information you have to read through. and they'll have anywhere from like 3 to 6, 8 questions about the information. And you'll have to look at the question, then go back to information and try and find out what part of the maybe 3 or 4 different tabs or a network diagram to find the best answer. And the approach there that I use is typically in the Architect exams, and I think it's in the DP exams, and it's in, I think that it might be in the AM exam, I can't remember, or on the Security AZ 500 exams. The key there is you may want to glance first before reading the questions about the summary of the problem statement. Don't read too much. Go to the question and then look what it's looking for, and then try and skim and find if it's talking about Azure, if it's talking about data storage, or to use Azure tables, or use Azure Synapse, or to use anything like that. Then look for that in the write-up and the actual passages on one of the tabs, and then try and answer the question. That tends to work best for me. You'll find the answer. And in that case study, you can go back and forth between those 3 to 6 ones. But once you leave the case study, you can't go back. And once you enter the case study, you can't go to the previous range of questions. So sometimes they kind of break them up different ways, but they'll let you know when you leave a section that you can no longer go back to. So that's the end. And then it lets you know in the real and in the preparation that, okay, this is the last question. Be sure that when you're done, you're saying you're done. And then you'll typically, maybe not immediately, maybe like one other question or one kind of survey thing, and then your heart's racing. It's like, I want to know my score. And you're trying to find it on the screen. They don't show it like this being red or green. They kind of in a little area off to the left-hand side, and it's like pass or fail. And for this one, I didn't answer any questions. That's why it's 0. So don't pay attention. That's not my true score. They'll let you know in the real world and in the PETS exam for these different areas, how did you do? So this is also beneficial when practicing, or if you take the real exam and say you don't pass. Look at your weakest area, see on the exam, was that covered 10%, 15%, or is it 30%? If it's 30%, spend more of your time studying that sub area of questions. So next, here's something about Wiz Labs. They have a right now, I've got it back in May, so $99 for all their products. So they have AWS, they have, Java, they've got all the kind of programming languages, and it's pretty cheap. So if you're out there on a budget, it's a pretty easy, inexpensive way to kind of exposure to a lot of different technologies. And it's a lot cheaper than Pluralsight's usually double the amount. So this is, and there are some test questions in there. Question banks or kind of flashcard there. The only problem is when they ask you a question and you see the response, it just says this is the right answer because Microsoft says here's a blog. They don't go through the in-depth explanation. So yeah, it's a good quiz, but you're not going to get as rich or as beneficial in the compressed, reading 5 minutes information. So next, name must your fear be before banish as you can. So the thing is, jumping into an exam, jumping into anything new, that's the kind of fear that you have. And so if you acknowledge what that is, then the greater chance you have of overcoming it and removing that obstacle. This is why this is important and crucial in my learning experience over my lifetime. If I say, yeah, that's going to be hard, but you know what? That's what I'm going to go tackle next. And then I can easily break that barrier and move on to the next thing. So study and note-taking tips. So we covered a little bit about the sample exams, Microsoft Learn, might be able to blog posts, hands-on, all those kind of things work to various degrees. And one of the true and do or do not. There is no try. So the thing is, you've got to get started. No matter, so one's going to depend upon what you have access to and what you're going to afford financially. So maybe you can't afford the $110 for the exam. What I would do is save. You can save $10, $15 a month, and then save up, then tackle one of the exams and build to get one of the training courses on Measure Up, or save up the money and after a couple months, then get the Whiz Labs, or just use the stuff from hands-on for Microsoft Learn. So practice exams are the best. Measure up. Practice exams are even you'll hear people say, "Oh, they're not great. They're not great." But I'm going to show you how to break them down to ways that I utilize to get you the most bang for the buck in time frame, and since you're spending money on those. And hands-on practice is important, but I'm going to tell you what, for all the exams I took, I didn't touch the Azure portal once. Now, I've had Azure experience beforehand. Like, I built applications using web apps, deploying them on slots, utilizing Azure table storage, integrating and creating services, Azure functions, and administering, supporting this thing, creating dashboards. And so I've done a fair amount. Been a developer for a long time. I've gotten networking kind of background experience and troubleshooting and firewall kind of foundational level information. So I've got those core concepts. So I have that. Everybody might not have that, but having that going in, I didn't touch the portal to kind of do any of those things to pass exams. And I say that to let you know that you can study the information, but without having to do it, to learn it in the special kind of way I'm going to show. That way you can speed up the time. Now, there might be some things where you want to go play hands-on or do something in a mock-up way to kind of in the coding aspect, or to kind of just touch it and see it. Now, one of the other aspects too that this kind of works out is right now all of the Azure exams don't have the labs. They've turned them off because of COVID and demand on the system. So I use this to my advantage for me, because that way you don't have to go memorize exactly where in the portal, how to do every little thing. And there were also issues with the speed of that working correctly. So to me, it's easier to find an answer out of 5 bullets in a multiple choice or a multiple drop down than having to memorize where everything is and hoping my monitor can see everything correctly and hoping the speed of the lab system works correctly and is fast enough. So the main study tips I've used are NLP and LEM. So NLP is neuro linguistic programming. So this refers to different sections of your brain and how different aspects are triggered and fired related to LEM, lateral eye movements. You might have heard about this, might not. So there's different studies that kind of go on that basically, based upon the way you move your eyes, up to the right, up and left, to the side, down, left and right, will trigger different aspects of your brain. Some are this picture here is based upon you're right-handed, but everybody, like, I'm right-handed, but when I play soccer, I'm left-footed. So I'm kind of, in some ways, ambidextrous, not with writing, but like scissors, I can use either hand. So you'll have to fine-tune this and learn for yourself. So the way it works is you're going to remember visually information. Auditory, if you want to close your eyes and look to the sides and remember the auditory. So maybe you heard a song and you recall that song, or you heard somebody say something in a meeting and you want to remember only the auditory portion of it. And then I forget I have to look at my notes of what the auditory, but that's the main two. And so different constructed is like, if I was saying, imagine you built your own private castle and it had to have pink walls. So you start to visually construct something out of your own imagination. A recall is that, I say the name of a car, a Porsche 911. Everybody pictures their known image of that item. So that's kind of the difference between remembered and constructed. So constructed can be, imaginary kind of skills. I'm trying to make sure if I had a note on. Okay. So train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. So this is kind of like Skywalker learning the force for the first time. Like, well, this is nonsense. What are you talking about? This is, ludicrous. How is eye movements or NLM or anything kind of really make a difference? It's just hocus pocus. I promise you it's not. I didn't trust it when I learned about it from a teacher in high school. And then later on, applied it in my military training school. They call it my A school, when you have to kind of go through. I was an air traffic controller, learning all the things for 9 months. And then later on, went to college. When I was in high school, I did horrible. I didn't even try. I had like a 1.72, barely graduated, and then came back, grew up in the military, and then went to college school in 3 years by taking 28 hours a semester, and a lot of times not going to class, and with 2 different universities at a time. And so I utilized this practice. So what I'm talking about is when we're little, you're taught A for apple as an image, B for bird, C for cat, D for dog, and all these other various objects. We were taught. I don't know about Santosh, you and other, other areas, but in the U.S., this is how you're kind of taught the language. This is how you're taught fundamentals. Here's the word, and here's an image. So we were taught visually early on. We just don't carry out always for everything we had to learn that's very advanced or more complicated in nature all the time. So we'll just practice this real quickly. So what comes to your mind when I say Mona Lisa? What about the Eiffel Tower? Just hold that in your head. And you probably picture something like this. The portrait of Mona Lisa and some variation of an image of the Eiffel Tower. Might not have been of daytime, might not have been the exact angle. Could have been, but I imagine everybody saw something like this. That's your visual recall. You've seen this image before. These are very prominent things, but like the Porsche or a sports car or a map of the United States, or any other person that's, widely known, you visually picture an image, flashes it in the back of your head of these things. So the same thing can be applied to the notes you take and the information you're trying to study. Now, it's very hard to, from as we saw those practice exam questions of looking at that and kind of really, you're not going to memorize those. You're not going to memorize the question because that's not going to do any good. You're not going to memorize some information on the Microsoft Learn site or somebody else's blog. That's just a way of just taking something in and doing, but you have to do something with it. So traditionally, when a lot of times, most of us probably start off taking notes in typical outline fashion. So here's some notes I took on Cognitive Services API. Well, you have the face, it has specific features, belongs to a group. Okay, that's cool. Bing image search. Well, it's a list of images based upon a text queries which you get back. Bing visual search. You can upload, you find similar images, or you can find a product image. Then there's Bing video search. So that's kind of notes organized. But the problem is it's kind of blah. It's not like the Mona Lisa. It's not like the picture of Eiffel Tower or the Van Gogh painting. It's not as vibrant. It doesn't jump out at you. You can't. If you look at this for 20 minutes, you probably couldn't close your eyes and re-image this. It would take too long. It doesn't do any good. So a lot of times when we're taught taking notes, here's a step above. One of the things I find works best for me is I have my loose leaf binder. One, I like loose leaf binders because as I need to rearrange notes or throw more notes in, I can insert them anywhere in any order. The other key thing is I'm using blue ink on white paper. The blue on white background tends to pop a little more than the black on white. The next thing is we've probably seen before, people will kind of, okay, I'm going to highlight and color code certain things. You'll probably see some people go crazy and highlight everywhere, different color, different thing. The key is the right amount of highlight. And so for me, the approach I start off was, okay, if it's an Azure product or a major component, this is kind of our service, I'm going to highlight it in blue because Azure blue, kind of just makes sense, kind of went. And then if I have a sub list of things, I'm going to choose another color. Okay, I'm just going to choose pink. And if it's a different type of thing, if it's maybe or PowerShell, I'm going to highlight that maybe green. If it's something in a definition, I might highlight orange with a green underline. So maybe have about 6 neighborhood, that kind of 6 or 7 color schemes that you utilize in your notes. So that's a lot easier to picture if you close your eyes, you look at this image and close your eyes and move it to the upper right or left-hand side and just try to picture this as an image, not for words, not for notes. Just picture it like the Mona Lisa, like a picture of the Eiffel Tower, like the A for Apple. You'll be able to recall this. Now, a lot of times you might have seen this in taking any kind of exam or referencing anything. Oh, I remember that being my notes, or I remember seeing this in a blog or someplace else in a PowerPoint, and it kind of was, the image is kind of fuzzy, or it's not all there. Or I remember being on the left-hand side of my notes or the right-hand side of my notes. We all have that capability, but it's again, you need to sharpen it. So me challenging myself, I said, this is good, but taking notes in this kind of orderly fashion is going to take forever to learn the things I need to learn. So I need something way faster. I need to find a way to kind of just blow this out the water to allow me to kind of do something quicker. So in learning and everything, I learned about graph databases. This is where I came from inspiration on how it evolved my notes, my note-taking skills. So graph databases are just about objects or entities and relationships between the two things. Now, I'm not going to color code mine with these 4,000 different colors because that doesn't do any benefit either. But the concept is when you're taking information, if I don't have to write it out neatly, if I find a piece of information, say about Azure storage, I can have that in a bubble. Then if something else is related to it, anywhere on the page, and then draw a line and illustrate that relationship. And if I got a loose leaf, I can start at one side, whatever side works for you, but connect to the other side. So I have a big workspace. And then if I find really later on, as I learn about information, it's better for me personally to organize Azure tables with other things. I can do such a way. I can quickly reorganize my notes. So here's an example on one of my notes pages on cognitive search we just saw. So I started off with cognitive search services API up top. And as I went through questions information, I would slowly add bubbles and relationships in between them. So we have phase, we have text, we have all the things we talked about are in the pink. So the same kind of structure, same purpose. But as I learned all the things about it that are important or related, I just kind of wrote them down, highlight them, and drew a line to the relationship. And sometimes I put a word or a verb or something about it, like I put default or upload to the ability. So this allowed me to take notes a lot quicker from the information I was learning without having to reorganize it. And so say later on, I'll learn about another API call. I wouldn't have to go back and redo all my notes and kind of fit in a neat, perfect outline. And this is the same, this information, you've read some stuff on it. You can then try and picture this, treat this as a piece of art, close your eyes and re-image it in your head. And the more you do that, it will stick. So I got to a point to where I was able to recall short-term, not long-term, not the type of thing that I forget what the actual term is. Somebody got to read something, they can always retain it in memory. But for short-term, enough for an exam, enough for kind of prep with a customer, enough to prep for an interview for your next job, to study 50, 60 pages of notes and recall everything I need to, and for the next 2 hours. Sometimes a little bit longer beyond that, the more you use some of the stuff. So the thing is, well, how do you get to this point from those practice questions? So here's what we're going to start off with is kind of one of the same questions we had before. It's like, well, there's all kind of information there. Well, how do I see it? How do I process it to quickly take the notes on it? And so here's the, go to the next slide. Then here's the response. So we're going to do the question to show all the answers immediately and just look at the information and read it. And don't worry about actually testing yourself. So here's what pops out to me when I see the question. Oh, okay, Azure Active Directory, that's a blue item. I'm not marking it in the print up like this. I'm going to write it down on my notes that way. Azure Directory. Okay, employee accounts use Azure. So it's a use kind of a verb, it's key. And then 80 basic licenses. You need to implement multi-factor. MFA is kind of an older feature, so just write down MFA somewhere. And sometimes I might not write this down right away, but these are things I'm picking out of my head. So when I come to understand the question, when I come to understand the choices, and then when I go finally to read the response, the correct answers, then once I've read all that and picked these things out mentally, then I can write that page of notes or whatever notes this question and correct and incorrect answers provide me at that point in time. So we have two actions. Okay, so that probably means there's, in the real world, there's at least two you need to do, or in most cases, two. Now, it could be the documentation we get to, there's maybe more, or maybe this scenario covers enough. That's a key clue. One, you need to answer two things, but it's also from a memorization, understanding the product. So what's different? Well, we got a P1, we got B2B, we got application proxy, and we have conditional access policy. Those are the main things you need to look at in the correct answers. Now, in the what explains it and say, oh, the one is Azure AD Premium. Here's our same ideal thing there. Then things I jump to is cost efficient and includes MFA support. And then you should do conditional access and the two little gray boxes around allow, deny, and some things you can do with it. Then we don't need to do B2B. It explains why, share with guest users, external organizations. We don't need application proxy because it is, it's access on premises. So that's a ton of information in one question that you can fill out. Now, your brain might not associate that all go on one page, but to me, these are all related around Azure P1 and kind of AD licensing. And they're all kind of key things that are tightly related to it. That's why the question was written with these wrong answers in there. There's, very close related. And so for me, I just kept them on the same page, but I had the Azure AD Premium. And as I kind of went through other questions, I was able to kind of build up more notes and things. So what happens is I'm going to go through, read the question, mark the things in my head mentally that kind of stick out, add to my notes on one page, or if I come back to the second question, it's similar questions, I'm going to come back and add those bubbles either to the sister page or the page right behind it or the same page if it fits. And just film it. Use as much space as you have. Don't worry about it. Imagine like a big whiteboard. And when I'm done with the entire exam doing this, then I'm going to highlight. And then, because I have all information at that point in time, or a larger, sample size information, then I'm going to study those as pieces of art once you've built up information. Now, if I'm doing the DP 200 and 201 exams, I would ideally do this for both those exams, because as a writer and as Measure Up, they're not going to cover everything to the third bullet point. They're going to cover most of it so you can pass the exam. They're not going to cover every little detail. But if you combine the two, you're going to find overlap, and things that might have been covered in 200 will be covered in the 201. The same thing works really well with the administrator exam and the security exam, the 500, and the administrator exam and the architect exams. They overlap a heavy set. So I'll go and do that. So here's where we kind of break down an example. I'll go for Azure AD, Basic, MFA. And then I've got my P1, B2B, app proxy, conditional access policy, and I've got some lines, kind of relationships in there. It's a licensing. And then, okay, MFA, kind of allow, deny, kind of examples. These are kind of conditions I can have a conditional access policy. I got some more notes about B2B, web apps, app proxy, kind of access on-prem. And then I go to my highlight. And so I choose, okay, basic and P1 are kind of sublist. These orange things are kind of, I just had other kind of important things to me. I use green as a second tier listing for me. And again, choose what you use. But I typically use, I think, look at my colors. I think I've got pink, orange, green, and blue. That's the only colors I use. And sometimes I use a combination, like an orange with a green underline. But that's about it. So do that. And if you, now this information here is a lot easier to picture as a picture and recall from your brain as an image, as a piece of art, versus the outline or versus just a black text on the note paper. And as you go to question number 2 or 3, or as you go to some other thing, you come back later on, or maybe it's a blog you read or some information, you can go back to the same notes and add to it. It's always buildable, and you don't have to worry about reorganizing. So and so it's like, okay, yeah, well, sure, right. Well, I promise you, if you feel the force, practice this in some facet, and you will build that memory. So the thing is, well, you always want to practice that way, but you also want to practice your auditory, your other recall abilities. So maybe not for the exam, but in the purposes of maybe paying attention better during these Zoom meetings or in-person meetings, where maybe the opposite. I'm really great at taking notes and paying attention and writing down auditory things, or you could recall songs, or my wife can. She's like, Google for songs. I know the words happy birthday, and that's it. I'm awful. So I'm always trying to improve auditory wise of maybe playing a video, a presentation, maybe throw aside or somewhere, and not looking at the video, not using my visual strengths of what's coming on, and just trying to recall that way and practice that way. So practice the things you're really good at and practice the things that you need to enhance upon. So let's see. So here's my official transcript. Again, I talked about this is kind of the first way I kind of challenged myself. Like, I'm going to take 2 exams in one day. And let's just see if I can do it. I did those at a test center. So, what I want to leave on is that always pass on what you've learned. No matter what you know, there's always somebody out there that can gain something from it. Maybe you don't feel ready to present in a presentation setting. Maybe, but at least get it on paper or share it one-on-one kind of informally with somebody else in your company or somebody you know through a meetup group that offer to listen to somebody, because there's things like right now, and I'm in the IBM, I'm having to learn their cloud stuff, and I'm having to go back and learn mainframe things I haven't covered. And maybe so it's all cyclical. You always have to kind of be willing to get back, because as you're teaching something, you're going to understand that topic a lot better than if you didn't take the time. So one of the things I want to, last thing is some of the links. So Tim Warner, if you're on Twitter, you probably know him. He's a real great guy. Shares lots of great tips on a lot of the Azure exams. He's an author for Pluralsight and shares a lot of Pluralsight information and when there's new courses out. Gregory Sweet is an individual that I met through Twitter. He's over in Great Britain, Glasgow, England, and he's an Azure MVP. I think he just said his second MVP. And he and I kind of started our user groups about the same time and kind of have been, morale support for each other throughout kind of and pushing each other to kind of do better and just try more things. Bill 59 has got the free open source kind of exam self-assessment tool. It's kind of like a spreadsheet. You go through there, and they cover it for most exams. And you can kind of go through and kind of give yourself, if you don't want to do the printout and do the highlighter, it's kind of the same thing. So I can't honestly remember what that is. Can't remember if that's a link. A lot of times Measure Up will do kind of a bundle of, buy 2 products, you save some more money, or you buy an exam with a free retake and you get the software training for free. But, it gets pricey, but just know that's out there. Or if you can take advantage of the certification exams that are $15 and your condition, you feel it meets the honor of the agreement, like Santosh had said. I think Cheap Certs that's the link to the actual Microsoft blog post. That's what it is. That's the actual link. So go to bit.ly cheap certs. Wiz Lab subscription. That's the link to the other product that is, and there's my Twitter handle. So I'd be glad to, answer questions. But again, don't just apply to the certification exam. These note-taking tips you can utilize in a meeting, one-on-one sessions, or anytime you're trying to learn anything, and practice these visual recall abilities. And you'll be surprised over time. Maybe the first month or first week, it takes you a while to kind of mentally accept it, and you're maybe able to memorize 2 or 3 pages, but you'll see that kind of quickly ramps up. So please let me know what questions you have, and I've got time to stick around and see how I can help you out. Thank you. I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Yeah, man. Thank you. That was a great talk.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think you and I kind of had this talk, but it's nice to see all of these tips again. So the one ask is some of those slides. If you could share those, I think those would be really helpful.
Yeah, I've got a link. Let me see. I'm going over to my Google Docs. I think I have it. I've got the whole deck shared. Let me pull it.
I like the idea of the note taking. And to be more, I'm a visual learner.